Hey, I'm Sam Aguilar, brand president with Oak and Stone Restaurants.
At every Oak and Stone, there are 50 self-pour taps with a dedicated guide to walk you through them. They have 8 locations in Florida and just added a 9th in Texas, and they're not stopping anytime soon. Sam Aguilar is the brand president of Oak and Stone. When Sam joined 9 years ago, there was only 1 location. Today, Sam tells us about the critical jump from 1 location to 2, the trickle-down of meetings that keeps 9 teams aligned, the unusual hire it takes to staff a self-pour tap wall, and the labor metric he runs alongside sales per labor hour because inflation made the old one lie. My name is DJ, and you're listening to The Pre-Shift by Separations. Hey, Sam, how are you today?
I'm great, DJ. Thanks for having me on. Great to meet you.
Let me just dive right in. So tell me a little bit about your background. You're at Oak and Stone now as the brand president, but you've had a career in restaurants leading up to that at Stonewood. Walk me through your career path to where you are today and, what you learned and what you were building.
Yeah, like many people, I caught the bug. I had graduated college with different intentions, got my first job in a restaurant, fell in love, and never looked back. I had 13 years with Stonewood Holdings, opened a location as a managing partner, grew into an area director role, and then grew into a vice president role with them. And I ended up moving on and taking a little bit of time looking for the next great opportunity where I could spend 13 years. And
Sure.
came across Oak and Stone when they had 1 location and found a brand that I really fell in love with. I've been with Oak and Stone now for 9 years and have grown this concept from 1 location to 9 locations. We actually just opened our 9th 2 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
1 week ago. In McKinney, Texas. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you found the time after opening a restaurant to come and talk to us. So we're very grateful for that.
That's right. That's right.
So talk to me about Oak and Stone a little bit. How did you join the brand at that 1 location? What role? And then I'm curious, how you stepped up and, when the brand started to grow. I know then there's some, an acquisition from Artistry at that time when you had 5 locations, but talk to me a little bit about the brand itself, what drew you to it, and then I guess those first 5 locations, what that experience was like.
When I first walked in, I looked at it and I thought that this is a unique concept. Craft kitchen and loaded taps. It seemed as something that is highly approachable and really fits everywhere. I joined, as I said, in a director of operations role. At 1 location with the purpose of helping to expand the brand, and then opened 4 more locations. We got to 5 locations before the great shutdown that we remember.
Yep.
In 2020. And we had to put our growth plans on pause for a little bit, as we all remember navigating that area. And we came back. Artistry acquired us in the beginning of 2022. We set our sights on the next restaurants to open. We had 2 more at that point we put under development, opened our next 2 locations in the fall of 2023, and then have opened 2 more recently. We opened our 8th location in December and just opened our 9th location, as I said, last week. In my time with the brand, I've grown from director of operations to vice president of operations. Was in that role for almost 3 years, and then moved into the brand president role that I currently serve at Oak and Stone.
Very nice. What was the hardest jump from 1 to 2, 2 to 3? And I guess I'm curious where the intricacies are in between those. Like, obviously 0 to 1 is probably the hardest, getting a restaurant open. You came after the fact, right? But what to you was the hardest one?
I would say that the jump to 2 was probably the most difficult.
Okay.
Because at that point, you're pulling all of your resources out of 1 location. So if it takes a training team of 10 or 15 or 20 people, you're pulling all of those resources out of your only other location. Also, when you're operating 1 restaurant, the things that got you here aren't going to get you there, right? So typically a single unit operator is very hands-on, is very involved in all of the decision making, and all of the processes and all of the oversight. And as you start to grow, that's not feasible,
Yeah.
right? So I'd say that was probably the most difficult. There's certainly growing pains at each of the steps along the way, and quite honestly, you know, they're all people related, right? It's a people business, and that is the commodity or the resource that is the hardest to come by, because you've got to grow it.
In that jump from 1 to 2, you're pulling from the existing pool of people that are working at that one location. So maybe, I mean, you don't want to take all the best people, right? You want to leave some at the first.
Right.
Absolutely. Was there a particular thing you remember? It could be, a process or a role or something in that 1 to 2 jump that's particularly memorable about like, oh, we got to do something differently. Or like, oh, we got to figure out a better way to do this.
Yeah, it probably was processes, right? The things that worked, because they also were doing different volume, right? Our second location opened up considerably busier than our first location. Great site selection, great brand recognition, and waiting for us to come to market. But some of those processes that again people become accustomed to as a single unit operator, really needed to change, and we needed to put those in place. And I think that's one of the key things to growth is having scalable processes and having great processes, right? Like I'll tell you, on one hand, we are a people business and it's all about people and relationships, but you need systems in order to be able to grow and be successful. Sometimes I would use the term building the airplane while flying it. And that's a lot of what those first couple of locations are, right? You're figuring out the things that work, and a lot of things that work. A lot of things that work in one location, your first location, don't always work at the next ones. At one location, we had a general manager that was very used to doing all of the things himself.
Sure.
And growing to two locations and supervision of another location, understanding that, you've got to let some of that stuff go, right? You've got to have solid system, whether it's PARs or it's a scheduling template in place, to be able to duplicate that.
Sure.
We learned that, schedules that worked in one location didn't work in another location. Different volume came at different times. Volume came in different waves. And having to change the approach to that scheduling was a big part of it.
Interesting. I definitely want to dive a little bit more into that.
I think it was, expanding the amount of employees. We went from one location that we did consistent volume, and had a great core group of people that all worked full time.
Sure.
Getting to that second location at a higher volume with a lot of people that did not want to necessarily work full time. They wanted to work a couple of shifts a week. We required us to pivot in some of those beliefs in scheduling.
What were some of those nitty gritty operational things that needed to change from a scheduling perspective in that expansion?
We moved more towards staggering shifts so that we could enough employees at peak volume, but not necessarily having to have them for the full day or the full shift.
Yeah.
This location did a lot more late night business. They were in a downtown area that got quite a lot of foot traffic and a lot of events that were later at night. So pivoting to bring people in later, so someone, a server wasn't working an 8 to a 10-hour shift, where a lot of the changes that had to be made for the managers that were used to scheduling the staff from 5 to 10, and everybody worked 5 to 10,
right,
to really having to get creative. They did a much stronger happy hour. So implementing some of, what some people would call a swing shift or a mid shift, where someone might come in a little bit later for lunch and stay through the afternoon to carry through, so we could bring closers in later in the evening because they were staying until 1 o'clock in the morning.
You're not in one location all the time. What was that split like for you, and how has that evolved now? From 2 to 5 to now 8 and 9. You're obviously now you have to be 9 places at once. How has your role evolved, and how have you found the best way to stay, in as many places as you can?
the things that get you to be a great single unit operator, usually because, as I mentioned, you're very involved, you control a lot of things, and moving into multi-unit, you have to understand that you can't control everything. You can't be involved in everything, and continuing to add locations. Growth creates complexity, but unfortunately complexity kills growth.
Sure.
So having to empower, to teach, and to trust is a big part of that. Because as you said, it can't be in 9 places at once, and nor do I want to be in 9 places at once.
How do you build that culture? What are some of the actual tactics, things you've done? It could be types of meetings, styles of communication. How do you build a culture of trust from the top down, from someone in
Yeah,
your
well,
position?
yeah, I mean, you mentioned communication. That's a critical part of it. And that's, one of those things also as you start to grow, that can get away from you. So, things that we currently use, right? Structured one-on-ones in people development, so I'll do a one-on-one with each of my area leads or my direct reports on a weekly basis. This is a time to connect personally, to connect professionally, but really about the other person and the things that they want to talk about, not necessarily business and results driven. Doing a weekly group meeting. This is where the direction comes from. This is where we discuss business results. We discuss, the objectives that we need to meet, the problems we need to solve in the business. As a group. So we're all aligned on the same things, moving forward in the same direction. That gets cascaded from, my direct reports or area leads down to all of our general managers, that they are weekly meetings. So we bring all the general managers. We do it remotely, now,
Yeah.
through video conferencing, but really important to keep everybody aligned and to make sure that the communication is way all the way down. Weekly GM meeting. From there, we cascade down to a weekly directional of the management team in the restaurant. Ideally, we're cascading all this information all the way down into the ranks in the restaurant, because what I found is that oftentimes that's what ends up getting missed, right? So as you grow from overseeing one location to a couple of locations, and then you get to 5 or 8 or 10, the communication can start to falter a bit. You think you said something to somebody, and maybe it didn't. Maybe that wasn't the same person, or the information doesn't make its way all the way down. So I think that those weekly meetings or directionals are critical, and at the restaurant level too, right? And that gets cascaded down to daily pre-shifts with the team, so they know what's important, what's going on. And that communication, the attention span's often quite a bit shorter. I'll see people try to overly complicate their pre-shift meetings with all of the stuff that we want to talk about. And at that point, you need to communicate the 3 things that are most important. What are the objectives for today? Get your team pumped up, get them excited, and let them know what the direction and the expectation is.
Absolutely. And it seems like it's kind of coming down from, your level through virtual meetings, right? Maybe their weekly cadence, and there's a nice trickle down, flow. Like you said, there's a flow down all the way to, the servers in the pre-shift meeting. As things grow and teams grow and people come in and out, a lot of information gets locked up, in certain people's brains, right? Especially, in restaurants, that's just how it's done, right? How do you do that? Ask so-and-so. What do you have a process for extracting information?
Well, I think there's a couple things there. The first one is standards and systems, right? Because you find that too often. There's somebody, whether it's the server that's been there for years, and they know how things are supposed to be done, or what the leader of that restaurant, the boss, wants, or the way that they like it. And while you can't over document and complicate things with manuals and pages and pages of rules and standards, right? I guess that's where great people selection comes into place. Because if you hire great people, you don't need to inundate them with a rule for everything. Good people make good decisions. You provide guardrails, and you provide areas that they can operate within. But you do need to have those standards documented in order to be able to properly train and continue to move forward. So the processes of how you do things do need to be documented so it can be trained, right? And systems are trainable, systems are duplicatable. I talk to leaders all the time about PARs, right?
Sure.
Par-based ordering. Whereas, you encounter those kitchen managers or those bar managers who know what they need. They know how much they need, which is great that you are so in tune with your business, but that's not duplicatable. We can't train future leaders. We can't grow if everything has to live in your head.
Sure.
So, par-based ordering is one of those systems that I highly recommend because you could teach people how to do that. It all can't live inside somebody's head.
So par being inventory management, that seems like that's one of the main, KPI. What are some of the other ones that you're looking at that you're teaching that, are critical to communication?
I'd say a big one right now is labor productivity.
Okay.
As we're in Florida, and as minimum wage continues to increase, the rate that servers are paid continues to go up every year, and productivity is really important. And I think that's a new way. Well, I shouldn't say it's a new way of measuring it, but everyone needing to get adapted to measuring labor results on productivity, checks per labor hour, or sales per labor hour, as opposed to just a percentage of their sales or a margin of the sales. We have moved now from just doing sales per labor hour to also looking at checks per labor hour. Because through recent inflation, I mean, as you've seen, restaurants, everybody's been raising prices.
Yep.
And you can get a falsely inflated sales per labor hour result just through increasing prices. So really looking at both of those, the sales and the checks per labor hour, to measure productivity. And that's really the new focus for what optimal labor or right-sized labor looks like. Weekly primes, we run a weekly prime report that measures our cost of goods based on purchases and then on inventory weeks based on inventory, as well as that labor number.
So labor, you're saying sales per labor hour, and then you said checks per labor hour. Are you
Checks per labor.
You're looking at both of those, or what is the process for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we look at both of those. And try to fit in a window for each of them. So based on our business model, optimal labor comes in somewhere around $70 of sales per labor hour. It comes in right around 1.42 checks per labor hour, or how many, guests or checks we can serve for each dollar of labor that we spend.
Okay. So the checks gives you a little bit more about like the actual workload of somebody. Okay. And that role you mentioned, is that the tap guide?
Tap guide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that. That's a different role.
Yeah. So as I had mentioned, one of the great features of Oakenstone is the self-pour tap wall. As a guest, that can create some, because it's something new, it can be unfamiliar and be a little scary. So, we use the role of the tap guide. You think of it as a tour guide. You think of it as a bartender for self-pour taps, where we've got someone who's the subject matter expert in beverage who is up there helping you make the right decision. So if you come up and you say, I normally drink this, we can guide you to something that we have that is going to meet what your favorites are, and hopefully also get you to explore a little. To try some things maybe you haven't tried before, because we do a lot of craft beer. We don't do a lot of macros on this wall. It's a lot of craft beer. We've got wine. We've got non-alcoholic mocktails, which have really been growing for us. We've got cocktails on this wall, and we've got spirits at the new locations. Some high-end spirits that we're able to put on there that you get an opportunity to sample and try.
That's awesome. And the tap guide kind of all oversees all of that as well. How do you scale a role like that? How do you track for example, their productivity, and how do you staff for that, frankly?
Well, I guess so. Quite simply, we measure that on beverage sales. Our margin, our percentage of sales that are in beverage. We measure a lot of that based on specifically on beer. How we define success would be increased beverage incidents, more beverages that are served. How that role is measured and grows is based on guest engagement, guest interaction, getting more people to convert and get comfortable with pouring their own beverage, and get excited about that, right? Like we're the place where you get to come up and explore different options, and sample different things and find new favorites. Without the right person in the role, which I think is part of what you're getting to, we just become the place where you have to pour your own beverage. So getting the right person in that role is critical. And as I said, we measure it by guest engagement. Uh, if we have better guest engagement, we have more people coming up and trying and exploring the wall. We increase our beverage sales from that. We had in that growth and development, we had a gentleman who actually opened our Naples restaurant as that tap guide, did a great job with building the beverage program there, had the opportunity to be developed and grow into a beverage director role with us. And then when we joined Artistry Restaurants, actually developed into the beverage manager position for all of the Artistry restaurants across all of the brands and all of the locations. So a very proud moment for Oakenstone
Nice.
in the people development.
That's awesome. So yeah, growth from within. I'm assuming that's a major part of getting to that 8 locations. When did things start to really change for you? About you said 1 to 2 was the hardest, but when did you start to see maybe a shift, if you will, in maybe your role, or like when did things start to get a little different?
8 locations is probably a good point to hit on because, as an area leader of the multi-unit supervision, I think that somewhere, in full service restaurants, somewhere around 7 locations is really kind of that point, right? For some brands, it might be 6. For some, it might be 8 to 10. For us, it's right around that 7 to 8 range. So
Sure.
as we grew to 8, I had to add a second area leader to my team, and start to redistribute things. Industry talent, when you hire from the outside, that brings knowledge, right? But it doesn't necessarily bring culture. Whereas when you're developing people internally, they're filled with the culture. They're filled with the brand. They don't have the experience
Sure.
necessarily in the leadership role. So you've really got to lean into developing the people from the inside and sprinkle in the industry talent that bring new ideas, new ways of thinking about things and approaching problems from things they've learned in their past at different brands. And they can really bring a great angle to it. But especially for us, preserving that culture and what our DNA is really leans heavily into developing from within.
And that's where some of those, the communication, like you mentioned, and the meetings and all of that seems to come into play, right? That's how you distill some of the culture down. So, what are some of the ways maybe you distill culture specifically down? Maybe not necessarily numbers or processes or just news or updates, but culture itself.
Knowing the people is the best way, really. So, even as brand president, I organize my week, and I typically have 2 days a week where I try and pack with what the necessary meetings and the other things that go along, which gives me, 3 to 4 days a week to spend out in the field with the teams. The majority of the time that I spend in the restaurants is with people. It's spending time with people, developing relationships, not just inspecting operations or focusing on processes. That's a very little part of it. The biggest part is developing relationships and building that bench strength and spotting future talent, and investing in that.
Any ways that you particularly have found are good ways to spot talent, or things that you've learned over time that, what makes a good person to promote?
Oh, it's a big secret. It's a huge reveal.
Okay.
Get to know them. Right? It's that simple. Get to know them. Having conversations, being genuine, being real. You've got to have a passion for people. I think to be in this business, you've really got to love that side of it. What I've found is that when you've got a relationship, whether it's with a vendor or it's with an employee or it's with an employer, when you've got a relationship, you get a little bit of grace, right? We're all human. We all make mistakes, right? I'll be the first person to tell you I make mistakes on a regular basis, probably. But when you've got a relationship, right? You get a little bit of grace. And when you know someone and they know you, really getting to know them as a human, you become invested in them. They become loyal to you. They become invested in you and what you're trying to do. And getting to understand what their goals are, what they want to accomplish, and then figuring out how to help them reach that within the organization is a huge part of developing the relationships in the future.
Do you have a standard process for developing people, like a program or, specific milestones that you do, like a systematized version of, career pathing, for example?
We have a pathway to GM, is what we call here. For us, it goes through the full step. So as an hourly employee, you express interest into wanting to do more. We spot someone with talent who has the values, who's a cultural fit, which really is the biggest part for us. As a values-based organization, we look to develop people who possess our values. I'm a big believer that you can train task, right? I can teach you how to write a schedule. We can teach you how to mix a drink or serve a guest or prepare an item, but we can't teach you to be a good person, right? So starting with those values, when we find that, the rest of it comes in training, right? It's investing in people and in training. So we start from that hourly role, developing into what we call a key leader. You get some responsibility in the restaurant. Starting small, you might manage a small budget. You might manage linen cost, or paper supplies ordering, right? You get a little bit of a budget in that hourly role. You start learning the schedule, what it means to work a manager or a leader scheduler, because that's a big change for someone going from a server to a manager in their scheduling. You start to get a feel for some of that without all the pressure. Hopefully you get to experience a lot of the good stuff, the fun stuff, the people stuff. And then as they grow through that, then we look at going into management or salaried leader with us. And we've got an 8-week training program that we do that is structured. You're learning specific things. You're participating in certain areas, different areas each week, starting to learn the processes, the systems, and how we run things. There are daily sit-downs and follow-ups with the training manager who's responsible for your management training. There are weekly sit-downs and follow-ups with the area lead who is overseeing your training for the position that you've been hired for. So at each step along the way, we're making sure that you're getting the information that you need. You're getting the training that you need. You have an opportunity to speak up if something's not going well or you're not learning, you don't feel you're learning what you need. Then after you graduate, we use the one-on-one system that I mentioned, right? Weekly manager one-on-ones. So the GMs, I mentioned weekly one-on-ones with my direct reports. We cascade that all the way down. The area leaders do one-on-ones with their GMs. The GMs do those one-on-ones with their managers. We've got it's a simple system. It's a binder, old school paper, but we use that because in there, as you're working on self-development, because development's got to be self-led, right? They can keep copies of the things that go along with it, whether it's an order guide or it's a training document for a system. They can keep all of that. So when we sit down, we can check in and measure their progress in relation to their areas of responsibility and their self-led development.
Awesome. And how long does that typically take? And, how is it like rolling all the time as needed, as you're opening, or is it, a class, or how does that work logistically?
Yeah, not really a class. As I said, we'll sit down. We expect the leaders to sit down with their reports on a regular basis. I've often said, even, best advice I can give any new manager is the most powerful tool in your toolbox is the one-on-one conversation, right? sitting down to be able to talk to someone about the things they're doing well, the things that you recognize, right? Because the number one thing people want is appreciation and recognition. So, you know, too oftentimes the high performers don't get that feedback because everybody invests their time and effort into the low performers, right? But taking time to sit down with a high performer, to take 5 minutes and grab a cup of coffee and tell them what they're doing great, what you appreciate them for, is just as important as taking those 10 minutes to sit down to talk to the person on your team that needs work and needs to do a better job. It's all important. Feedback is a gift. So it's not just to the team members, but to the managers, as I said, that's ongoing. It's not something that only happens as they come out of training. It's not something that necessarily follows a system. It's ongoing, right? There's no end date to develop.
And are there standardized, benefits or compensation bumps, along that program? Do they know, say, at the end of this, I get, X more an hour or however that works,
Yeah, I mean, it's all along there are those things.
Okay.
So we're in a performance-based environment. So, as you move from an hourly in a role into a key leader. So if we're talking about an hourly employee who moves into a supervisor position, there's a pay increase that comes with that along with the responsibility. Moving into management, moving from an assistant manager to an assistant general manager to a general manager.
Sure.
There are checks all along that way that involve adjustments to compensation that go hand in hand with the adjustments to responsibility.
Awesome. And I'm curious, now that you're growing, we're coming up at time here, going to Texas, you just opened that first out of state market. What is that like for you as a brand president? Where's it like going somewhere new, not in Florida where people don't know you yet?
I think you hit on exactly what was most different is new market, new area. Nobody knows us. There's no brand recognition. So as we've grown around Florida, we've been very intentional in the markets that we've gone into, and there's been brand recognition. People knew who we were before we came to market. They'd experienced us in a nearby town, or had seen us. Whereas moving to Texas, there was no familiarity. We selected a great market that really who we are and how we operate. And one of the great things we did is we invited quite a few influencers from Texas, brought them to Florida, and got to fully immerse them in Oak and Stone experience, from not just dining and as a guest, but also to get back behind the scenes and experience some of that. We created some buzz with that.
Nice.
Moving like that into a totally new state, totally new market, it takes a lot of intentionality. You got to pick the right market. You've got to get some recognition out there up front. And from opening the restaurant, for us, I come back to what I mentioned before, which is being a values-based organization. We took our time with finding the management fits, the leaders for that restaurant, being the first one to make sure they were fully aligned culturally with us. We brought them to Florida and fully immersed them in all of their training here for an extended period of time, a longer than normal training program, to make sure they got all things that are Oak and Stone before going back to Texas. And then there's a high level of support. There's one of us that's out there with them all the time. From myself, I will spell in the area leader spends a week out there, and then I go and spend time to let him get back and visit the couple of restaurants that he's got in Florida, and then he goes back out and I come home, because we want to really lean into the support early. Because getting the restaurant open was not the finish line. That was the starting line. That's the starting blocks, right? That's when you really got to lean into the things that you need to ensure happen every day to uphold the brand standards. It's not just getting it open. It's
Sure.
really starting to grow it once it opens.
Curious how you settled on Texas first. And then what are some of those things that you have to do every day?
We picked Texas because, Texas is business friendly. We've had some investors that have a lot of relationships in the Dallas area. And that's how we kind of picked this as our first step outside the state of Florida, was through relationships that were had and a place that makes it easy to open and start and scale a business.
Okay. As we kind of come to a close here, is franchising something that's still on the table? That's, what I saw. And what has to be kind of true for you guys before you then trust someone else with your brand?
Franchising is still something that we are excited about and planning to explore. We have not fully gone into that yet because, quite honestly, there's plenty of opportunities for more company-owned restaurants throughout the state of Florida, as well as starting a new market in Texas. It really comes down to finding the right partner, right? Like finding is, as I mentioned, being a values-based organization, finding the right franchise partner who is, does have the same values as we do, who we are sure can uphold the brand standards as we venture into other states and more satellite locations, because that's really what it brings. There's got to be that trust. There's got to be the right person. Just as much as we put a lot of effort into selecting the right person to join our team on an hourly and a leader level, we've got to select the right person to join our team to be, become part of the family and an extension of us as a franchise.
Awesome. If someone is in the stage of growing their business, getting, maybe they have a few locations and they're looking at, 6, 7, 8, what advice would you give to them? What is something you wish someone told you going through that process?
Unfortunately, most people have to learn it for themselves, myself included. And you can't do it all. That is truly not scalable. What got you here isn't going to get you there. You probably have had a lot of success by guiding and having your hand in things and getting them just the way they want. But again, that's not duplicatable and that's not scalable. Lean heavily into selecting the right person, define clearly what success looks like from a people standpoint. And be incredibly selective about those that join your team, because you've got to operate on trust. You've got to empower, you've got to trust. Mistakes are going to be made along the way, but really understanding those two things, the most important thing that you do is the interviewing and hiring, the people selection. Hands down, the most important thing you do. That will create all of your problems, and that will solve all of your problems. And the second one is letting go and learning to empower and understanding that you can't do it all. That got you here, but that's not going to get you to 5 to 10 to 15 or more.
Yeah. And it's a lot easier to, amend a process or change something up than it is to bring, new people in or have to, unfortunately, exit certain folks, or that's just so time consuming, and, there's a lot that is involved with that. What are you most excited about? And then what is your favorite thing to eat or drink at Oakenstone?
I'm most excited about the fact that we have developed the team. When we opened our location in Cape Coral, Florida in December, most of the trainers that were on that team were, by the end of it, asking to come to the next opening. And the training team that we just used when we opened in McKinney in Texas were the same trainers, predominantly from the last round. We had a couple new ones join the team, but they have all, since that opening in December, many of them have stepped up and grown into key leader roles and are now looking at what the future looks like and are asking to come to the next one. And we brought a couple more people into the fold, intentionally planning on having to divide and conquer for these next ones. And the team has just said, hey, coach, put me in. I want to do it. Whatever it is, I want to do it. And I think that's the most rewarding and the most exciting thing about what we've got going on at Oakenstone. It's watching people develop, and as it's a people business, the most rewarding part of what I do and the most satisfying part of the career that I've had has been people development. It's been identifying people and helping them reach their goals and grow on and become what hopefully they thought they could become what I might have seen in them, but really helping them reach their goals and develop into a great career. My favorite thing to eat at Oakenstone, wow, I've actually got two of them. One is the Voodoo Chicken Sandwich. It's a buffalo chicken sandwich. We build it with Zapp's Voodoo potato chips. piled high. It's a great twist on a buffalo chicken sandwich. And then because I'm a lover of turkey sandwiches, as you can tell, sandwich is my favorite food group. We do a turkey BALT. So bacon, apple, lettuce, tomato, fresh shaved turkey, and smoked Gouda cheese.
Beautiful.
Thick cut brioche is my other favorite.
Awesome. Well, Sam, now I'm hungry, but thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks for coming on the pre-chef. You're busy, you got locations open, so I'll let you go.
DJ, it's been great. I've really enjoyed talking with you today. Thank you
No
for
problem.
the honor of joining your podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you.
As we wrap up and I listen back to my conversation with Sam, a few major points stood out to me. First, Sam runs 2 labor metrics, not 1. Sales per labor hour and checks per labor hour. Because when prices go up, and they have, sales per labor hour goes up with it, even if your team isn't actually doing more work. Checks per labor hour tells you what's really happening on the floor. For Oak and Stone, the window is roughly $70 in sales and 1.2 checks per labor hour. And if you're only watching one number, you're looking with one eye closed. Second is that Sam's meeting Waterfall has 5 steps down from him, down to area leads, to GMs, to managers, and the daily pre-shift meeting. The reason it doesn't break is that the message has to get leaner at each level. By the time it reaches your team before service, it's 3 things. Not 7, not a full agenda, 3. If you can name what the 3 things are, then your pre-shift isn't doing its job. And last, your high performers are probably getting less feedback than your low performers, which makes sense, but it's not because they don't deserve it, but because it's easy to let them keep doing their thing at a high level. Sam's advice is to just take 5 minutes, a cup of coffee, drink, whatever, tell them what they're doing well. Feedback is a gift, and most of us aren't giving it to the right people. And that's the show. Thanks to Sam of Oak and Stone for joining us. If you enjoyed it, please leave a review and share it with one of your friends to help the show grow. We'd love to hear what you think. Reach out to podcast@7shifts.com. As always, I'm DJ, and this has been Pre-Shift.